So a huge welcome. This is the launch party online for the Summer Seed Cycling Challenge. I am just going to flip to my slides now. So hello, welcome, and what we're going to do today, we're going to talk through more about what seed cycling is, why it can help, what the protocol involves. Luckily, it's quite simple, and also how to tell where in your cycle you are, which is the most tricky bit of the whole protocol. And there are several different ways we can do that. If you have questions, because I'm looking at slides, I won't necessarily see the questions all the time, so I'll have to flip back and forth between the screens. So do type them into the chat box, but I may not see them immediately. So first of all, a quick introduction. Those of you that don't know me, my website's The Healthy Womb. My name's Rachel, and I do a mixture of women's health therapies, and I help women with all sorts of hormonal and period issues or fertility issues. My qualifications, I was asked the other day, which is quite funny. I've never had anyone ask for me to put them in the Facebook group, but they did ask. So I am qualified in fertility massage therapy, women's health, reflexology, natural family planning, which is an evidence-based method for choosing to conceive or not to conceive using the body's natural signs and symptoms. And I'm also qualified as a nutritionist and a nutritional therapist in the UK. And I've also qualified as a health coach specialising in women's health, which is evidence-based strategies for improving hormonal and period issues, and coaching is a very different skill set to the nutrition skill set. And we'll see why shortly, because this is one of the reasons why I like this protocol. So that's me. As I said, my website is The Healthy Womb, and I've also got the Period Whisperer at school, which has got some courses on it already waiting to go. So we're going to be covering during this webinar what seed cycling is, how it can help you, how it can help various different hormonal issues, what the protocol involves in detail, and then because the protocol does involve you knowing where you are in your cycle or what to do if you don't have a cycle, we'll be going through that at the end as well. So hopefully you should have some idea of what you personally need to do. And of course, there is the support in the Facebook group too. So if you haven't joined, make sure you have joined that. So let's get started. What is seed cycling? Let's learn a bit more about it. So it's essentially eating certain seeds at certain points in your cycle to help even out your cycle, to balance your hormones. And it can help if you've got minor cycle defects, it can really help with just pushing them along. But also if you do have any kind of hormonal imbalance, anecdotally, I've got lots of clients who have found that it has helped with certain symptoms, whether it's PMS, whether it's luteal phase defect, whether it's PCOS symptoms such as acne. It's really helped take the edge off certain things, and then it acts as like a gateway into looking after your body and doing other protocols that can help, because different protocols can help different people in different ways. So what might help me with my PCOS wouldn't necessarily help someone else with theirs, and the same with any other kind of hormonal issue. Interestingly though, even though seed cycling as a protocol doesn't have any evidence specifically for it, there is a lot of evidence around flax seeds, which is one of the seeds we're going to be looking at. And there is a few studies showing that using flax seeds once a day has helped with a number of hormonal issues, such as acne, lowering testosterone in women with high testosterone, hot flashes, lowering cholesterol in the blood, and a number of other hormonal issues. Unfortunately, the other seeds don't have any studies on them. That doesn't mean that they don't work, it just means no one studied them yet. However, anecdotally, I've got a huge number of friends and colleagues who have tried this protocol, and it's been really successful for them, either in terms of improving their symptoms, or in some cases where they were just a little bit out of balance. It's really made a huge difference to them and pretty much knocked everything on the head. The reason why I really wanted to do a simple group protocol over the summer is because we've all been there where we've looked up our condition online thanks to Dr. Google, or we've bought a book or we've bought a course and we know that we could just follow this new diet or whatever and it could fix everything. But then actually implementing it's really hard. So there are loads of books out there and it's really easy to find the information you need. But having time to read the book, having time to think about it, having time to put everything into place, or if someone was to come to me wanting a nutritional plan, I could put one together really easily. But having them actually implement it is a completely different kettle of fish. So when we look at just implementing something that's really quick, really simple, we're more likely to do it, and we're more likely to do it consistently, and we're more likely to do it long term and be successful in making a transformation rather than just a change. Because when you make a change, you can change back, and that's why I liked coaching, because we sort of learnt more about how people work. So for that reason, I thought it would be fun in the Facebook group to get everyone trying seed cycling and seeing how it goes. So I'm just going to quick look for any questions. I'm assuming you can all hear me because you're still online and no one's complaining that they can't hear me yet. So good. I'm just going to flip back to the slides. Okay, so that's the background behind seed cycling. So conditions it could help. It can help a number of hormonal conditions. Let's just think about what seeds are. So seeds contain a number of compounds. First of all, they contain several macronutrients. So they contain protein and they contain fat. When you eat protein and fat, this can help stabilize your blood sugar. So if you have any hormonal conditions that are affected by blood sugars or insulin, main ones being prediabetes and PCOS, this can help because the more fat we eat and the more protein we eat with our food, the more it balances out the sugar content of that food. So it enables us to have that bit of a buffer and can lower the overall GI of the food that you're eating. On top of that, it's got fiber in it, and fiber, when you chew it properly, will coat the gut, which reduces the increases the absorption time of sugars. So if you think of the difference between drinking a smoothie and drinking fruit juice has no fiber to it. So your body absorbs all the sugar in one hit, the liver can't cope with it, and then it creates fat deposits, and then it stores the sugar in those fat deposits, and that's how you get non-alcoholic fatty liver. With a smoothie, you've got the fiber. The fiber coats the gut, which slows down the absorption rate. So the liver has time to break it down and excrete it. So it's really important that we do eat fiber with our diet. The other great thing about seeds is that they contain both soluble and insoluble fiber. So soluble fiber is pretty amazing. It binds to a lot of things. One really good evidence-based example for seeds is that a lot of seeds, especially flax seeds, will bind to cholesterol and escort it out the body, which is super useful if you want to keep your cholesterol levels in healthy ranges. The other thing as well, they have insoluble fiber, which acts to add bulk and helps you poop. And pooping is really important for hormonal balance. So let's take an example of that. So we've got estrogen. Now, estrogen, we should use it once, and then our liver should break it down, stick it in our poop, and we should excrete it. And unfortunately, most of us don't go to the toilet regularly enough. So this means that if we're not pooping 3 to 5 times a day, usually within 20 minutes to 40 minutes of eating, we start reabsorbing things that our body is trying to excrete. So we start reabsorbing estrogen, and then it goes around in a cycle. And this can lead to something called estrogen dominance. And signs that you have estrogen dominance, there's quite a lot, but common ones are heavy periods, painful periods, dark coloured periods, whether they look more purplish or brownish or blackish, but throughout the bleed, endometriosis, fibroids, PMS, bloating, tender breasts, estrogen responsive breast cancers, a luteal phase defect, which is where the second half of your cycle is shorter than 12 to 14 days, spotting before your period. In fact, most of the low progesterone signs are actually estrogen dominant signs, and it's not that your progesterone is too low, it's usually that your estrogen is too high in relation to your progesterone, and just going to the toilet more can make a huge difference in helping with that. So having this insoluble fiber can really help with that, and drinking plenty of water. So we know these seeds, well, by taking in more seeds, we can help with estrogen dominance in some women. I'll go through the flip side of that, because some people will have an increase in estrogen dominant symptoms, so I'll go through that in a minute. The other thing is, a lot of fertility and preconception issues are due to hormonal imbalances, as we've mentioned above. So if you have anything that's affected by blood sugar levels, insulin, estrogen, progesterone, thyroid, theoretically, this could help you with that. Maybe not completely, but it could make a difference to some of the symptoms. A lot of the research I did find showed that the seeds helped with hot flashes, which is low estrogen, which is quite common during menopause. But it can really help us with preparing our bodies for menopause, dealing with the symptoms during the perimenopause and after menopause, and even after hysterectomy. It can help with any kind of hormonal swings during that period as well. And finally, it can help us because we have to know where we are in our cycle, and because we're going to talk about how we can measure an improvement in our signs and symptoms. You're going to get to know your body a lot better, and you're also going to understand your cycle a lot better at the end of it as well, which I think is pretty priceless. So let's go back to estrogen dominance. I said there is a flip side to that. There is a small percentage of women who, when they take seeds, because the seeds contain phytoestrogens, in most women, phytoestrogens bind with the estrogen receptors, which we have all over our body, to stop the effect of estrogen dominance, because they stop estrogen reacting with those receptors. They stop the signs of estrogen dominance. That's what happens to most people. There is a small portion of women who, when they increase their phytoestrogen intake, that it will actually have an estrogenic effect, and they will get increased estrogen dominant symptoms. So what I've done is I've created a handout that will be sent to you after this with a list of all the estrogen dominant symptoms, and you can put in there, go through today before you start the protocol, and sort of have a think about how you want to measure it. Most of them I've given you a guidance, so it might be a scale of 0 to 5, might be include a description, but just go through and fill that in, and then in a month's time go through and fill it in again, and hopefully you should see an improvement. But if you see signs of estrogen dominance based on those symptoms, then it's probably not going to be the right thing for you. But as I said, that's quite a small minority of people. What it can't do. Okay, so no protocol can make up for a poor lifestyle. So if you've got a really rubbish diet, you'll know if you do or not. So if you eat lots of junk food, if you eat lots of processed food, you don't eat many vegetables, you drink a lot, you probably know you're going to be in that category. If you've got a relatively balanced diet, or you do eat really cleanly, you'll probably find it has a bigger effect. And no supplementation can make up for a rubbish diet. You can't eat rubbish and then eat. I do come across people that think they can just take a load of supplements, like vitamin supplements and mineral supplements and digestive enzymes and all sorts of things, and it doesn't work like that. Your body does need a real food basis. Little or no exercise. This is a really interesting one. Different people need different amount of exercise, and different body weights can also affect your hormones levels as well. If you exercise too much, not many people do, but there are a group of people that do. They can often get really long cycles or something called hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is where they don't get periods very often. And this is because they exercise so much, they detox all their hormones before they can form, and their body fat percentage is so low that their body can't make hormones, and your body needs fat to make hormones. Equally, if you've got, say, for example, estrogen dominance, that's where you've actually got quite a lot of body fat sometimes, or you're not exercising enough to detox estrogen. So getting exercise and body fat percentages is really personal to the individual, and it's worth looking at the different symptoms that you have as to whether you think that that could be affecting you. Stress. So if you have unrelenting stress, you have too much stress, you're not offsetting it, because sometimes we can't say no to things, but you can do things that are more fun to make you feel better. If you have unrelenting or chronic stress or a lot of high stress events, that will set your body into a hormonal cascade, and nothing can help with that. The only thing you can do is to reduce the stress. Stress causes a massive fluctuation in a hormone called cortisol, and that affects every single hormone in the body. If you have a really acute stress event, your reproductive system will switch off because it's not a system essential for life. So if you imagine being chased by a wolf, your body's going to think, well, do I prioritize trying to make a baby or running from a wolf? And your body's going to prioritize running from a wolf. So it'll increase your blood pressure, it'll thicken your blood, ready to clot if you cut yourself, it'll empty out your digestive system, it'll set off this whole hormonal cascade. If you have chronic low-level stress, you'll see slow changes happening to your cycle. So one example would be that your body doesn't feel safe to have a baby. So after you've ovulated, your luteal phase, which should be 2 weeks, will suddenly get cut short. And this happened to me when I took a call, unfortunately, from my mum, and her cat had died, and I'd ovulated 2 days before. My period started 2 days later because I was quite shocked by it. But obviously, my body recognised that it wasn't a good time for me to be pregnant, even though I wouldn't have been at that point. But your body does try and make up for that. If you have a stressful event happen in the first half of your cycle, your body will show the signs of trying to ovulate, and I'll go through those a bit later on. But you'll get a cervical fluid peak maybe, and then it'll drop off, and you think, oh, I should have ovulated, and you might not see a temperature spike. But actually, everything seems to have stopped. You think, well, that's a bit odd. And then you get another pre-ovulatory pattern coming. You think, well, this is really strange. And then you look and you think, well, actually, I had an exam. And what it is your body goes, well, I'm going to try and ovulate. And then it thinks, it's not a safe time to try and ovulate, so let's hold back. We'll try again. So then you get these odd cycles of a really long pre-ovulatory phase and a really short post-ovulatory phase. And nothing will stop that. And the other thing with cortisol as well, cortisol and progesterone is needed for that second half of your cycle, are both made from the same base hormone called pregnenolone. And if your body needs to make more cortisol because you're stressed, it won't have enough pregnenolone to make the maximum amount of progesterone. And the other thing is, cortisol receptors block your cortisol blocks your progesterone receptors. So even if you are producing the correct amount of progesterone or you're using progesterone cream, it might not make any difference because you don't have any receptors free to notice that it's there. So stress is really important, and if you've got unrelenting stress and you're not dealing with it, nothing can help with that. Sleep is something else that we overlook, but it's super important for hormones. It is known that just missing one night's decent sleep can cause you to be as insulin resistant as a diabetic, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. So sleep is really important for our hormones as well. And the other thing with sleep is if you don't sleep enough, you don't assimilate all the nutrients from what you've eaten. So if you've eaten a really clean diet, but you're only sleeping 4 hours a night, you're not going to be dealing with all the nutrients you've taken in. So you're not absorbing everything and you're essentially malnourished. Hopefully, this, but smoking, alcohol, drugs, both prescribed and recreational. Obviously, don't stop taking any prescribed drugs without speaking to your doctor first. But anything like that will be prioritized by your liver for breakdown, which means that it can't break down things like estrogen after it's used it. So that can cause massive hormonal shifts. So really think about what you can do to support this protocol. If you do have anything there where you're thinking, I could, cut down on commitments here, or I could really try to offset the stress maybe by doing something like going for a walk. If you've got kids, you can take your kids for a walk. Going and doing some colouring in, that's one of my favourites actually. Anything that helps you offset that stress can reduce the effect of stress. It's not just the cutting down on responsibilities. I'm just going to have a quick look to see if there are any other questions. Okay, I can't see any more questions. Okay, so let's have a look at who it's not suitable for. Okay, first of all, if you're allergic to any of the seeds, so I'm allergic to sesame seeds, obviously don't consume those seeds. You can use the other seeds that are listed in the cycle. If you're waiting for results on or tests on particular conditions, if you then try to do an intervention such as seed cycling to improve these conditions, then you could be affecting the results of those tests. And actually, when you want tests done, you kind of want them done at your worst to show what is really going on. If you find you're getting symptoms of estrogen dominance, which are getting worse after starting this protocol, so again, look at that sheet that I send out to you and make sure that you go through it once and then you review at least a month later and see if the symptoms are getting better or worse. As I said, it's really a minority of people that would be in that group. Secondly, if you're on any kind of medications, then you need to check either with your doctor, pharmacist, or if you go into your medication box, there's a packet in there and there should be a leaflet and it'll tell you if there's anything that you can't take with your medication. So there are some that you can't eat citrus fruits with, or you can't take alcohol with, or certain foods. So it's always worth reading those anyway. And if you're pregnant, you would need to follow the second half of the protocol if you want to follow it at all. Finally, if you are doing any dietary change, you really should just check it with your doctor anyway, just to make sure there's nothing that you can't think of, but they might do that would stop you from taking part in this. Okay, so hopefully we've got an overview. I'm just going to give you a minute to see if anyone's got any questions. Okay. Right, there is a question about specific hours to sleep. I can't see the top of the question. Is it okay for me to sleep until I'm rested or at any time that I usually sleep in? So there's a really good book by someone called Sean Stevenson called Sleep Smarter. And he talks about, he did a lot of evidence-based research on sleep, including one about being insulin resistant. And he's big on people having a regular bedtime at the same time, even on the weekends, and working out how many hours sleep you need. Now, most people have a baseline of 7 to 8 hours sleep that they need. So he recommended starting at getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep and seeing if that works for you. If you don't feel rested, then you need to go to bed earlier. But he was very much against lie-ins because he felt that they actually disrupted your sleep cycle further. I'll just have a look. I can't see any other questions, but I hope that answered that. And the book again is called Sleep Smarter. It's a very good book. It's very evidence-based, but a lot of low-hanging fruit there to improve your sleep. Okay, I can't see any other questions, but some people have confirmed that they can hear and see me, which is wonderful. Right, let's carry on. So before you start, this is really important. On one of the handouts I'm going to send you is a checklist, and I'm going to ask you what your goals are. So before I mentioned a number of hormonal issues, and if you could think about which ones that you would like to see an improvement in. So it could be acne, it could be painful periods, heavy periods, long periods, spotting, endometriosis, fibroids, PMS, mood swings, tender breasts, tender pelvic area. You might have a luteal phase defect. What is it that you would really like to see improve? And you can fill that in on the handout. And have a think about how you would describe it now and how you would like it to change, because this will give you a clear indicator of what it is that you want to see change. And this protocol, the earliest you'll see a change is in a month. Usually 3 to 4 months you start seeing long-term changes, but you do need to measure what you're hoping to see change in order to, one, be encouraged to carry on, but two, to see whether it's working for you, or if you're in the minority where it makes estrogen dominant symptoms worse, you obviously want to see if it's making that worse, but as I said, that's quite rare. So have a think about what your goal is first. Write it down somewhere. It's really important to write it down and how you're going to measure it. So it might be you have 3 days where you're feeling really irritable before your period starts. And if you're in that group of people that feel like that, then think about, okay, so how irritable do I feel? What kind of things am I feeling? How can I measure it? So it might be how annoyed you feel throughout the day, how many people you feel have annoyed you throughout the day. Think about how you could measure it. If it's you've got period pain, how many days do you have period pain for? Is it on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being no pain and 10 being the worst pain in your life and you can't breathe properly? What scale is it there? And then you can go back a month later and revisit that pain measure and for how long. If it's that you have absent periods or irregular periods, one of the benefits of seed cycling is that you're eating fats and they will help you produce more hormones. So have a think about how long your cycle is at the moment. Maybe it's 3 months or half a year in between periods. So you want to see that time frame get shorter. So have a think about what your goal is, and you can have several goals that you measure and see if any of them improve and how you're going to measure them and how you're going to know if this is working for you. So that's really important. The next thing is, how are you going to get support and accountability? So for support, that's one of the reasons why I was doing this in the Facebook group, because you can chat to other women who are doing the protocol as well and find out what they're struggling with. Are they forgetting to take their seeds? Are you struggling with ways of taking them that are tasty? You could ask each other how they're getting on. You can find out whether anyone else is finding their symptoms and moving at the same rate as yours. Maybe you can find someone who's having similar symptoms to you and you can talk about how you're feeling. It's really important that you feel supported because you're more likely to be successful. And finally, if you're feeling accountable to someone, you're more likely to be successful. So it's really important to share. If you think you're likely to forget, then what can you do to help yourself remember? Do you need to set a reminder on your phone every day? Do you need to get someone to be your accountability partner and text you every day or Facebook message you every day? And again, you can ask in the Facebook group if you need that, because the likelihood is there's someone else who will also need the same, so you can work together. So how are you going to get that support and accountability? You might want to get that from a friend. So just have a think about how you can do that to make it more successful for you, because we're all different in how we're accountable. Okay, so let's have a look at the protocol itself. It's actually quite simple. There are various variants of it on the internet. So first of all, we split the cycle into 2 phases, and we're going to have a look at those a bit later on. So the first half of your cycle, from menstruation, so day 1 of your period, and that's your first day of your proper bleed, not spotting, but the actual flow, through to ovulation, and we'll talk about how to measure that in a little while. Or if you're not bleeding, for whatever reason, from the new moon to the full moon, that's the first half of the cycle. And the basic protocol is, in the first half of the cycle, you're going to consume 1 tablespoon a day of seeds that are either flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, or both. The advanced version of this is to ensure that the seeds are raw, that they're ground, and you can have up to 2 tablespoons a day, 1 of flax and 1 of pumpkin seeds. And the reason why we have these seeds are because they have various different compounds in them that are thought to support this early half of your cycle. So it's pretty simple, but the knowing which part of your cycle is a bit more hard work. In terms of grinding the seeds, most people use a coffee grinder. You could eat them whole, but you do need to chew them in order to get some of those compounds out. Ideally, they're going to be raw and they're going to be ground, but for now, just adding them in is the basics. Getting in 2 tablespoons a day of ground raw seeds is the ideal, and we're going to talk about the different ways you can do that, but just start with what's manageable for you for now. The second half of the protocol is, oh, I just noticed a problem on the slides. So from full moon to menstruation, not what I've got on the slide, so from full moon to menstruation, full moon, yeah, that confused. Full moon to new moon, or ovulation to menstruation, so the second half of your cycle. So once you've ovulated, I'll just repeat that again. Ovulation to menstruation, or full moon to new moon. So I've got that back to front there. That's the second half of your cycle. You're going to consume 1 tablespoon a day of either sesame seeds or sunflower seeds, or it can be a mixture of both. And again, the advanced version of this is ensuring they're raw, that they're ground, and having 1 tablespoon of each. But for now, you just want 1 in. I don't advise going whole hog and having 2 a day to start with, because if you don't eat something on a regular basis and you suddenly add it in, especially if it's got high fiber content, you may have some gastrointestinal symptoms that aren't the most pleasant, whilst your body tries to catch up with that. So that's why we start off with 1 tablespoon a day. As I said, you obviously want to move on to raw and ensure that they're ground. If you don't have access to a coffee grinder, you could try a pestle and mortar. If you have a blender, you can try that, because sometimes people put them into smoothies. Other options are that you could put the seeds into a plastic bag and hit them with either a hammer or a rolling pin, especially if you've got any anger management issues. That could be quite fun to get them out. So ideally ground, but for now, just getting them into your diet is the first step. So how to consume? Ideally, you want to grind the seeds. We've just covered that. Another ideal is that we soak seeds. All grains and seeds ideally should be soaked overnight and then dried out, and that breaks down any inflammatory properties they may have. Obviously, for now, if you can't do that, then just consuming them is better than not consuming them if you're worried about faffing around about soaking them overnight and then drying them out properly. When you grind and dry out seeds, make sure you consume them within 48 hours because they can go rancid very quickly and then they become highly inflammatory and can cause you more issues. Try and get organic seeds where possible. Another thing is if they come with their hulls on, then ensure that you get the ones with the hulls on, because the hulls actually contain the most nutrients that we want, especially the lignans, which are the phytoestrogens that we were talking about earlier. Ideally, you want them raw, but if, say, for example, you've got a really good flaxseed cracker recipe, then, go for that for now, just to get used to getting them in your diet. But some ideas to get you started: you can grind them or sprinkle them on your yogurt, your salads, soups, smoothies, porridges, oatmeal, granola. If you want to add them as a garnish on top of food, like some people have sprigs of parsley, you could do that and just sprinkle them over your food. There are so many things that you could do to fit these into just your food as it is, or just have them as a snack. And if you've got other ideas, or even you're trying any of these, please do take a picture and stick them in the Facebook group, because it will encourage other people to do the same. Okay, oops, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so supporting the protocol. Hopefully you remember a bit earlier on I said about it doesn't matter how you supplement if you've got a bit of a rubbishy lifestyle, it's not going to help. So if you can just ensure that you're eating really nutritious foods, so whole foods and vegetables where possible, practicing good sleep hygiene, so getting your 7 to 8 hours sleep, having a wind down routine before you go to sleep, no light at night because that can disrupt your sleep. No devices the hour before you go to bed because that can disrupt your sleep. Getting movement into your day, especially if you're static and sat at an office chair all day long. If you're not getting exercise, getting some exercise in that feels good. Even a walk in nature with your child can be good movement. So it doesn't have to be going to the gym. You could just go for a nice walk. That can be highly beneficial. And super important, deal with any stress. So maybe there are things that you don't really have to do that you can say no to. You might feel a bit bad at first, but trust me, after a while you get pretty good at saying no when you need to. And if you can't reduce stressful things, you can look at where you can offset it by doing things that just make you feel good. Okay. So I'm just going to have a look for questions, see if there are any extra questions coming through. Okay, so we've got some more questions about sleep. If you've got any other questions, do type them now, because I'm about to go into how to tell what phase of the cycle you're in. So I usually fall asleep anytime between 12 and 4 a.m. and wake up 7 to 8 hours later. Follow-up question: if I'm sleeping less than 7 hours and still feeling rested, is that considered okay? Okay, so the key thing with sleep is making sure that you're getting the same pattern. If you're working shifts or your work day is different, then your sleep pattern is going to be different. But trying to make sure that it's consistent is the key. So if you go to bed at 12 o'clock regularly, but you normally wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and you feel rested, that's fine. If it's you're regularly going to sleep between 12 and 4, but you have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, then that's not going to be okay. The other thing to bear in mind is Sarah Gottfried, who has written several amazing books, by the way. One is The Hormone Cure and one is The Hormone Reset. And she is a doctor, she's a gynecologist that then became a functional medicine practitioner, and she's done loads of research on foods and supplements. And she talks about the angel train and getting to sleep by 10 o'clock. And the reason she recommends that is because she said the way the body clock works, because your body knows roughly what time of day it is by the levels of light it detects, and it produces hormones in response to that. Every hour of sleep you get before midnight is as restorative as 2 hours of sleep after midnight. So it's worth bearing that in mind if you can get to sleep a bit earlier. But obviously, if you work a different day, say you work 10 till 6, obviously your day's going to be out, but working out what pattern and keeping to that pattern is going to be the most beneficial for you. Now, I can't see any other questions, so I'm going to move on to the next part of this webinar, which is talking about what cycle phase you're in. So this is obviously the key thing to getting this protocol right, is knowing which phase you are in. So let's just talk through the menstrual cycle in more detail. I'm going to have a quick sip of water. Okay. Now, some of you might think this is weird, but we're going to start off with menstruation. And when we look at charting our cycle, we always start with menstruation because it's the first sign that most of us are aware of. Most of us know when we're bleeding, when we're not bleeding. So that's where we start. So we start off, the first day of your period is calendar day 1 or cycle day 1. If you have pre-period spotting, day 1 is the first day of your flow. And if your flow appears at 8 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night, that is still day 1. It's not next day is day 1. It's whatever day your flow first appeared, that's day 1. So menstruation is your hormones have dropped off because you didn't get pregnant. So after that, your body's going to start the cycle again. So you have some hormones sent from your brain, in particular your pituitary gland, called follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, otherwise known as FSH and LH. And they stimulate the ovaries to mature follicles in them. As these follicles mature, they produce something called estrogen. And the estrogen has several effects on the body. One, it causes the womb lining to grow or proliferate. This lining is called endometrium. 2, it causes the crypts in the cervix to start producing cervical fluid or cervical mucus. It's technically mucus, but I tend to say fluid because that's just a nicer word. So this phase is often called the follicular phase because the follicles are developing, but some people do call it the proliferative phase because the womb lining is proliferating. After a while, there'll be one follicle that is the Graafian follicle, and this is because it has matured more than the others and it's ready for ovulation. And the amount of estrogen from this follicle signals to the brain that you're ready to ovulate, and the brain then sends a surge of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which causes the follicle to rupture. It'll release an egg, and it'll cause the remaining follicle to turn into something called the corpus luteum, which means yellow body, and that's a white fibrous body, and that produces progesterone. Meanwhile, the fallopian tube has hopefully found the egg and collected it. If there's any sperm in the fallopian tube, it'll try and fertilize the egg. The egg will continue on its journey into the womb. By the time it reaches the womb, it'll either have been fertilized or it's unlikely to be viable. However, even though most people say the egg's dead at this point, they mean that it's no longer viable for fertilization, but it does send out a signal, which is a hormone called HCG, and this signals the corpus luteum to keep producing progesterone. Now, if you have fertilized this egg, this signal will get stronger, so the amount of progesterone will increase. If this egg hasn't been fertilized, you'll get 2 weeks of a temperature increase, and then as the egg does finally die, the signal gets weaker and the progesterone levels will decrease. So we have ovulation. We normally consider that to be 3 days long, but the actual event of ovulation is actually around 15 minutes long, which is why if you get ovulation pains, you can never take painkillers in time because they take about 40 minutes to kick in. And then once you've ovulated and progesterone's kicked in, this is your luteal phase, and this is about 2 weeks long. So some interesting things that we can observe in the menstrual cycle is that When we're in the follicular phase or the proliferative phase, we start getting a buildup of cervical fluid. And as we prepare for ovulation, we get this increase in cervical fluid. So you may notice that you could have up between 3 and 7 days of bleeding. Then you might get a few dry days. Then you might notice in your knickers, or if you feel around your vulva, you might notice getting a bit of clottiness or tackiness or some crumb-like material coming out. And then eventually it turns a bit more creamier. And then towards ovulation, you'll feel a lot damper and a lot wetter, and a lot of people think it's discharge, but it's not. It's cervical fluid, and it's required for fertility. So you feel really damp and wet, and when you wipe yourself after going to the loo, the toilet roll slides, you'll notice it in your panties more. Some people notice it as they're walking, if they've got a lot of it. And then once your body thinks it's ovulated, it drops off. And it's important to remember this, that it's called a cervical fluid peak. So you get a little bit and it gets wetter and wetter and wetter, and then it drops off. We call this our cervical fluid peak day. So that shows us that our body is trying to ovulate. If you are someone who's got stress or anything that is halting this process, you'll get this peak and then it'll stop, and then you'll start getting cervical fluid again a few days to a week or so later. So that's how we can tell our body is trying to ovulate. And if you're going to use this method to know when to switch seeds, we're going to assume that when the cervical fluid is dropped off, that's the point at which you ovulated. The luteal phase, the rise in progesterone causes our body temperature to rise. And if you chart your temperature, you'll notice that you get a spike in temperature that lasts until your period starts. When your period starts, progesterone drops off and estrogen drops off, but the progesterone dropping off will mean that your body temperature gets lower and your womb lining will fall away and you have your period. So if you're charting your cycle using temperatures, then you'll notice a spike, and that's when you switch your seeds. But let's have a look at the different ways of telling which phase you're in. So first of all, if you do natural family planning or fertility awareness, which are known as NFP and FAM, or symptothermal charting, where you chart both your cervical fluid and your temperature, that's the most accurate way, and that's what I'm qualified to teach. You can do that and you'll just see when you've ovulated, and you can switch over to phase 2 then. If you're interested, I do have a webinar recording of how to chart your cycle, but not how to interpret it for either contraception or to get pregnant. So it's just the how to chart it and get it onto paper and seeing when you ovulate. I do have that in the Period Whisperer school if you wanted to go in and have a look, and that's just a webinar with several resources, but I'm looking to upgrade that into a proper program. Basal body temperature charting. So some of you indicated in your survey that you take your temperature every morning and you chart it on an app. So you could look for a temperature rise. The easiest way, because you're not using this for contraception or for fertility, I'm going to send you a chart, which is a circular chart, and you put the date in and you just notice whether you have any cervical fluid that day, and you're looking for that peak, and then once it's dropped off, you switch seeds. So you can fill that in, and there's a video telling you how to fill that in, and it's also got how to fill in how you're feeling, because you'll notice how you feel changes throughout the cycle, and that's also down to your hormones as well. So if you don't know anything else, you can do that, and that's actually based on what's happening with your body. If you do have a regular cycle, you can either switch halfway through if it's a 28 or a 29-day cycle. If it's a bit longer than that, then you're going to assume your last 14 days are your luteal phase and try and work backwards from that. So if you have a regular 32-day cycle, take off 14 from 32, so day 18 you'd switch to phase 2. I don't like that because it's not really paying any attention to your body. I prefer at least the charting cervical fluid and seeing when you have a fluid peak. And when that drops off, switch then. And it's worth saying as well, if you do get it wrong, it's not going to be the end of the world, because all the research on the flax seeds do show that it supports proper progesterone production as well. So don't get too upset about it. Just try and get it roughly right. So if you're not bleeding, or you've got really long cycles and you have no idea where you are, in this case, the easiest thing to do is to follow the moon cycle. So if you've got a really long cycle and you're not quite sure where you are, then you see a cervical fluid peak, then you can switch then. If you've got a really long cycle and you have no idea where you are, then start observing the moon. And it's thought that once upon a time, before the industrial era, that we used to ovulate on the full moon and bleed on the dark moon. And I've got a few friends that live on narrowboats, and when their electricity has gone off, they said that their cycles have automatically synced to that. And a lot of people I know, when they start fixing their hormones, myself included, you start looking at the moon and go, I wonder where it is, and you notice that you have completely synced with it. My cycle is exactly 29 days long, and a moon cycle is 29 days long. So I find that quite fascinating. So what you do is, and this works if you've menopaused or you've had a hysterectomy, phase 1 is new moon to full moon. On the full moon, you switch to phase 2, and then on the new moon, you switch back to phase 1. So it's pretty simple. You just need to look at the sky, or you can download a lunar calendar. So that's what to do if you don't want to chart and you're not getting any kind of cycle and you're not sure what to do. So we're nearly at the end. Hooray. Your checklist. I'm going to send you a checklist with all the handouts. What are your goals? So what is it you want to see change? How will you measure your progress? So fill that in. Then go through the estrogen dominance checklist just to see where you are, because you want to check in a month's time to see how that changes. Think about how you're going to remain accountable and how you're going to remember to do the protocol. It is a pretty simple protocol. It's just the knowing where you are within your cycle that's the difficult thing. Work out where you are in your cycle. You can ask questions about this in the Facebook group, obviously. There are loads of cycle charting apps if you do chart your temperature. As I said, I'll send you one for charting your cervical fluid. Look for and share your recipes. So if you come across a really nice flaxseed cracker recipe, because let's be honest, some flaxseed crackers are really soapy. If you come across a good one, do share it. If you make a nice smoothie or salad and sprinkle your seeds on top, even if you think, oh, anyone can do this, do take a picture and share it in the Facebook group and tag it in seed cycling, because it can help inspire other people. It just might not occur to them it could be that simple, especially if they haven't watched this webinar yet. So do look for and share recipes. And finally, do just start the protocol and let us know how you're getting on. You don't have to wait till the start of a cycle or to the start of a phase. You can just go for it now. There's nothing stopping you. It's just the going out and buying seeds. So that's everything you need to know. I'm going to have a look for questions. Okay, I can see someone said hello, but I can't see who it is. Unfortunately, I can't see the very top comment, so I'm going to give you a few minutes to ask questions. Just to clarify, you will get a replay of this webinar sent to you, so don't worry if you didn't get everything. You can ask questions in the Facebook group. You're going to get the checklist sent to you with goal setting. You're going to get the estrogen dominance checklist sent to you, and that you should review each month. You're going to get the protocol sent to you. Oh, hello, Melanie. Anyone who doesn't know, Melanie is my partner in all things womb related, and she's at sacredwomb.com. Okay, someone's asked, can we start with the challenge right away, or should I wait to the first day of my period? You can start right away. If you know what phase of the cycle you're in, that's obviously more helpful. I can't see who's asked that, but if you know roughly when your period's due, we can perhaps kind of figure out which phase you should be in. So if you know your period's due within the next 2 weeks, start with phase 2. If you really have no clue, you can start with phase 1, wait to see if you have any kind of cervical fluid pattern build up. Any other questions? Unfortunately, I can't see the very top comment, which is a bit frustrating. Yes. So as I said, you'll get the protocol sent to you. You'll get the checklists sent to you. You will get the replay sent to you. You'll get the cycle chart, which it looks like a circle with lots of segments in, and you just fill in the date. You can fill in the moon phase if you want to. There's instructions and a video instruction set as well with that. You can also chart how you're feeling on those days, as well as whether you're bleeding, whether you're dry, whether you're damp, whether you've got any cervical fluid. And that will give you an idea, and you're just looking for where the cervical fluid builds up, and then when it drops off, and sometimes it'll go to completely dry, or sometimes it'll go from super wet and sticky to almost like dry and crumbly or tacky. You'll see a big change. It'll go back a phase, and we'll assume you've ovulated at that point. I'm just going to wait another few minutes to see if there are any other questions, comments, or feedback. So I'm just going to hold on for another few minutes because I know there is a delay between me speaking and you can hear me. But hopefully that's taken you through everything that you needed to know. And hopefully you can see it's a pretty simple protocol. It's just the kind of working out where you are in your cycle when you start. If you really are in huge amounts of doubt as to where you are and you want to wait till your period starts, you can do. But again, ask questions in the Facebook group and we can help each other out there. And as I said, if you want to learn how to chart your cycle, just in terms of getting it down in the NFP method rules or fertility awareness rules, I've got that course available at periodwhisperer.teachable.com, and it's only $25. I'm going to be doing a proper program very soon, but that's just the replay from a webinar I did a while ago that gives you all the tools you need to be able to do that. Okay, I haven't got any more questions coming in, so I'm going to leave it there. Any other questions, go into the Facebook group. And finally, I'm going to put a post on the Facebook group asking people to let us know who is in and who's doing the seed cycling challenge. So hopefully we'll see people commenting on that, but please do let people know that you're in and that you're involved. Even if you forget to do it every single day, it's really worth making a note because it can really help motivate people. Okay, there's another question that's come in. I do have estrogen dominance. I should only do the second part. Okay. Even if you have estrogen dominance, you should do both parts of the protocol. Both parts are designed to help with estrogen dominance. Flax seeds can help clear excess estrogen, as can pumpkin seeds. It's just rare in some women that any kind of seeds will increase their estrogen dominance. So if you are in the camp where it gets worse, then you don't take any of the seeds. So you either do the full protocol or none, which is quite straightforward. If you do have estrogen dominance, it should, in most people, in around 90 to 95% of people, you will see an improvement by doing the full protocol. And the studies I've read showed that flax seeds really helped with all the estrogen dominance symptoms. I'll hang on another minute because that question took a while to come through. But ladies, are you feeling a bit more confident about this now? I'd just like a bit of feedback, hopefully. Thank you very much. That was very informative. Okay, thank you very much. Good feedback. But hopefully you can see it's a pretty simple protocol. It's not too difficult, and in all honesty, all the seeds can help with hormones. So even if you do take the wrong ones at the wrong point in the cycle, it's not going to have, the most detrimental effect, because you'd have to eat a lot of them to have that kind of effect. They're not supplements. Supplements, if you take at the wrong time, can have a major effect. But whole foods, this is one of the benefits of a food-based protocol. It takes a much longer time to have an impact. And just to reiterate, most people will start seeing small differences after a month. Most people, it takes 3 to 4 months to really see a difference, which is why it's the summer challenge, because it'll probably take you all summer to start seeing a difference. Okay, I can't see any more questions coming in, so I'm going to leave it there. The replay will hopefully be out at some point tomorrow. It takes a while for this to get uploaded, and that's the bit I have to wait for. So you should get your replay tomorrow, and any questions, do stick them in the Facebook group and let people know that you're in and you're taking part, because that'll encourage more people to join in. All right, ladies, have a lovely evening. Take care and goodbye.